What happens when your mind just won't slow down? When stress, anxiety, and life all pile up at once? Today, we're diving into a topic that affects every single one of us: managing mental health. And I've got just the right person to help us unpack it. Joining me today is Jamie Hughes, the host of the Managing Mental Health podcast. It's a show that's all about breaking the stigma and finding real ways to take care of yourself in a world that never hits pause. So take a deep breath, stay tuned. This one might just change the way you think about mental health and maybe even the way you manage your own. It all starts right after this.
Love and laughter lead the way through the darkest, hardest days. Hope still burns, it won't retire. This is me, my life rewired. I was broken, now I'm whole. Wrote new chapters for my soul. Not the end, just re-inspired. This is me, my life rewired.
Jamie, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Rob. Glad to be here.
Nice to have you. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about something that people don't talk about a lot. It's mental health.
hmm Yeah, we have a lot of conversations about it just because of being in the field and intentionally exploring these issues. But life is always busy, and sometimes the mental health aspect gets pushed to the back.
We do tend to do that. So what started you on your journey to say, I'm going to be a podcaster?
It kind of came out of finishing my master's degree. So I
Mm-hmm.
have my master's in psychology, specializing in trauma. And in the latter part of that, I began the idea of writing. And so, of course, the schoolwork itself is full of writing, papers. And my thesis paper ended up getting published on the academic side. So I was like, wow, I want to take all the stuff I've learned, not just from the classes, but throughout the many years of personal and professional experience, want to take all those things and be able to get them out to people in ways that would benefit them. So I began writing and wrote my first four books, got them published, each on a different aspect of mental health. And
Mm-hmm.
from there, it's kind of where the idea of the podcast came. I was
Gotcha.
on a few other people's podcasts as a speaker, as a guest like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, well, I really enjoy this. And it's a great way to further those conversations about mental health awareness. And I
Yeah.
can do it about anything, any area. So that's kind of where the podcast idea came from.
If you had to sit down and someone said, what are some of the things that are like the big bullet points right now that's on the minds of the people that are really hurting right now? What's like some of the top ones that stick out?
In terms of on people's minds that are hurting right
Mm-hmm.
now is just the overwhelm of stress, the overwhelm to the point of it's a burden of information,
Yeah.
a burden of a desire for healing and a
Mm-hmm.
desire for peace that we just can't seem to find sometimes, and that eludes us often,
Right.
especially if you're hurting. I heard a guy speaking, this psychiatrist or psychologist, and he had a really good kind of observation, I guess, and it really hit home for me. And that was, no matter which way you come at it, whether it's from an evolutionary perspective, whether it's from a theological perspective, our human minds, our consciousness is not made for the world we live in right now. We're not made to know
Mm.
about disasters all the way around the world 24/7. Our psyche can't
Yeah.
handle that.
Mm-mm.
We're not made to be abused and neglected as children. Our minds are not made for that. Our minds are made for attachment and love. So when we go through those things, it changes the way we have to survive. And right now,
Yeah.
we're just so inundated that it's just too much. So it's no
Mm-hmm.
wonder that peace of mind seems to elude us, especially if you're the person watching or listening that's already going through a hard time mentally, emotionally, cognitively, physically.
I've heard people say, "Oh, I don't watch the news. It's just so depressing." And I get that. And I feel like that we had to find a balance. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, to some extent. It's funny. That reminds me of a quote. He said that, and this was probably 30 years ago or more. He said, at even then, he said, people wouldn't buy good news. People wouldn't pay
Hmm.
to sit and watch, read, or listen to good news all day, every day. Bad news is what sells. In a sense, there isn't a balance of that. I think the balance just comes from knowing that your life, your circle
Hmm.
is what's most important for you, not just to you,
Yeah.
but for you. And there's those things on the outskirts that are kind of like interesting to know, but those are not really your priorities. When we're scrolling, when we're reading, watching, we're getting this stuff all the time. And so, yeah, even without the
Right.
news, if you're just on TikTok watching cat videos or dancing videos, the the algorithm is going to show you at some point, you know, police
Yeah.
brutality, uh, starvation in Africa, war threats in Istanbul and Russia and Ukraine. You know, we're still going to get those things kind of handed to us. I don't know that there's a good balance, but I think the
Hmm.
point is we should individually take the time to say, I don't, this doesn't have anything to do with me directly. I don't need to sit and, you know, watch and listen to this all the time. So I need to take a break from that. So kind of finding your own.
We're putting way too much negative into our brain
Yeah.
around the clock.
Yeah. Exactly.
I one time I told somebody this, and you can tell me if I gave them bad advice or not. Hopefully,
Okay.
I gave them an okay advice.
All right.
But this person is the kind of person that's always watching the news, always watching it, and telling me, "Oh, this is going on in the world. Oh, that's going on in the world." And I mean, she was just obsessed with it. And I said, I think we need to get to a point where we don't want to shut the world off because I think it's good to know what's going on around us,
Hmm.
but get the information and then just shut it off because the more you dwell on it, the more it's going to eat at you and the more
Hmm.
you're going to worry about it.
Hmm.
And what can we correct about it anyway by worrying about it?
Yeah. And this kind of goes back to your last question about there being a balance. And
Hmm.
this is what makes this a tricky discussion point. Let's say it is something that you personally are involved with.
Mm.
You kind of have to dive in and you kind of have to do your digging, your research, your listening, your watching, which is bad. So a good example of this would be if we look at the burnout rate of professionals. The top burnout rates, like top 10, are all in the helping profession. In other words,
Wow.
they listen to other people's problems on a daily
Mm.
basis. You know, we're talking law enforcement, first responders, social workers, therapists, doctors, nurses. These are all in the top 10 list of burnout, secondary traumatic stress, um, these types of issues because you're even just listening to it, it's affecting you. So
Hmm.
if you're watching stuff and you're listening to stuff all the time, especially to your point that doesn't have anything to do with you, you can't manage, control, change. Yeah, you're hurting yourself. That's all you're doing is
Yeah.
hurting yourself. You're not helping the problem, and you probably can't. Um, you know, focus on what you can control, and 100% of the time, every single individual, that's going to start with this, with me.
What do you say to those people that you've preached to them to stop inundating yourself with all that negative in the world, but they continue to do it? How do you break through to them?
I would challenge them at first to say, okay, If this is what you feel you want to do or need to do, um, I would challenge you to do a comparison. Let's over the next week, every single day, before and after you watch the news or whatever. Before, you write down what you're thinking, what's top on your mind, how you're feeling, and then afterwards, the same thing. Do that every day for at
Mm.
least a week, maybe 2 weeks. Then take a break and don't watch anything for that same amount of time, whether it be a week or 2 weeks. And at the end of that period, write down how you feel about yourself. Write down where you would say your stress level is. How do you view peace? What's most important to you? What do you enjoy the most? Those types of things. And make a comparison. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If you're exactly the same, then keep doing what you're doing. But if you see a difference, I would, and I would bet money that you would see some type of difference, some improvement.
So, kind of switching gears, sleep. That is something that I feel, and I'm sure you hear it in your profession all the time. We're getting less sleep nowadays than we were, you know, several years ago. And it's probably mostly because of the topic we were just talking about, because we are getting so much information coming at us and we can't get that brain to shut off. I, I was told by another counselor once that you write all your problems on a sheet of paper and you lay it on the bed, and they'll be there to wait for you the next morning when you wake up. That's great advice,
Hmm.
but how do you implement that? How do you force your brain to say, okay, I'm cutting it off?
Sleep is one of the first and strongest indicators of mental illness. And I mean sleep problems, sorry. Sleep problems, indicators of mental illness, overstress, burnout, all those things. There are a couple of pieces of advice, and the second one I just read a study on. The first one I've heard for years and years, and it still reigns true. And that is, if we're watching TV or if we're on our phones, we do it right up until the time to go to bed. So we may be watching a show, and it
Mm.
doesn't really matter if it's, a happy show, funny show, if it's a horror movie, if it's sci-fi. It doesn't matter. We watch it, the show's over, we turn it off, maybe go to the bathroom, brush our teeth, and go right to bed. So we're talking 5 or 10 minutes at most
Mm.
normally. Our phones,
Yeah.
we're taking them to bed. They're plugged up right beside us. So we often sit there and scroll, or have a late night chat before we go to sleep. So if you
Hmm.
just think of this in terms of energy, your body changes its energetic frequency when it's time to go to sleep. Your parasympathetic nervous system kicks in and starts slowing down parts of your body, including conscious thought. Well, if you've got energy still coming in, it's slowing that process down. It's interfering with that process. So you're going to have a more difficult time going to sleep. It's not going to be as easy. It's not going to be as quick. And your subconscious, that part of your mind that's still trying to store and process memories, it's still working while your body still is trying to go to sleep. So that aspect in itself is extremely detrimental to sleep, to sound sleep.
Mm.
Even if you go to sleep physically, your eyes close and you drift off, your mind is still trying to process and store what it just saw within the past hour. So set an alarm. If you want to go to bed at 11 o'clock, set an alarm for 10. At 10 o'clock, all electronics go off. Go brush your teeth, go use the bathroom, whatever you want to do um, to unwind. If you want to write, that will be a good thing. And that's going to be point number two. But just set an hour. Just make it, do the opposite of what you would do for work. If you got to be at work at 8, guess what? Your butt's getting up at 6:30 or 7 because you set an alarm. Why? Because being
Right.
at work on time is important, or you're going to get fired. Well, be your own boss. Say, I got to be in bed at, like in bed as in ready to go to sleep at 10 o'clock
Yeah.
or 11 o'clock. So I'm going to set an alarm to make sure I'm there on time and on schedule. Point number two, and this was the one I just read a study about. There was a group that took, there were some researchers that took a group of people and they split them in two, and they were doing this specifically to look at um, how we ruminate or keep thinking about. So that's rumination, as you think about something over and over and over and over. How we ruminate about our problems, about what's coming up, how much we worry, in other words. And they took this
Hmm.
group, they split them in two, and at bedtime during the study, they had half of the group, and these weren't even like necessarily worrisome problems, but these were just really like to-do list things. Half the group they had at bedtime in a notebook write down the things that they needed to do tomorrow. I need to do this, 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 I need to do this. The other group they didn't. And they were all tracked at the same intervals of time between when they turned the lights out and laid down to go to sleep and how long it took them to go to sleep. Guess what? You know the answer to this. You know what I'm getting ready to say. The study
Oh
showed
yeah.
by a huge margin, I mean like 80 to 85%, those people that just wrote down their to-do list for the next day went to sleep in half the time and reported
Wow.
sleeping better. In other words, when they woke up, they felt relaxed. They felt like they got a good night's sleep just by doing that. So that's another cue. If you want to improve your sleep, which is extremely, extremely important to mental
Hmm.
well being, just when you lay down to go to bed, get a notebook. And again, this isn't necessarily diary stuff. This is just, oh, here's what I've got going on tomorrow or this week. Every night, just write it
Yeah.
down, 2 or 3 minutes, boom. It it clears your mind because your mind is trying to keep those priorities up there so it doesn't forget. It's like, oh, I got to go.
Yeah.
I got to remember to buy shampoo tomorrow. I don't, not me personally. You probably do. I don't. But, you know, I got to go to this meeting tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Your mind's trying to keep that at the top so you don't forget because it's a priority.
Yeah.
But if you write it down, it kind of, it alleviates that pressure
Hmm.
and you sleep better.
Yeah. So I guess the advice I was given about that is there is a science behind it then.
Oh, yeah.
Switching gears again, what are some tips that you can give people that are the worry warts? I know these people because I work with them every day. We'll get an email and they'll say, "Oh, this is bad news," and I'm reading the same email and I don't see it as bad news. And I'm probably one of the exceptions to the rule because my wife has always said, "Does anything bother you? Do you worry about anything?" But I've always been the person that's I know that if I worry about it, it's going to happen or it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. You're probably one of the exceptions.
Yeah.
That's a good exception. That's a very good exception.
Yeah.
Um, even without a mental health issue, a neurodivergent issue, something like that, it's still kind of normal, to be concerned about some things. And
Hmm.
again, it kind of depends on what it is. What's the severity we're talking about?
Yeah.
Like you said, you get an email and it's kind of neutral in tone, but you automatically are negative about it. That might be an indication, if the person doesn't already know this, but that might be an indication of a neurodivergency. And that's very
Mm.
popular for ADHD. People with ADHD have a thing most of the time, not every single person, because again, all these issues are kind of on a spectrum. You can have a little or a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of people have rejection sensitivity, which means that anything, even if it's neutral, your brain automatically interprets it as bad, as rejection.
Mm.
So that's one thing. In terms of working on that in terms of helping that, journaling helps. Again, same principle we just talked about, just writing down your to-do list. Same thing with journaling. If you're writing down your thoughts and emotions, it helps alleviate some of that pressure in the brain. You know, your subconscious is less worried about it now. And it helps your autonomy as well, because now you're not necessarily reliant on someone else to try to figure you out, to try to tell you who you are and what you think and what you feel. You write it down, you can observe it, and it kind
Mm.
of makes sense. Oh, yeah. And I'll give a good example. I was in a relationship and I journal a lot. This was one of the main tools I learned years and years and years ago in my healing and growth from my own mental health issues. And so I journal all the time. I had met someone, we had talked, we had started dating. And so, of course, in my journal, I wrote notes, what I thought, what I felt during that process. Some fast forward to some time later, the relationship wasn't going so well and it was coming to an end. So I sat down to write in my journal and I just happened to flip back and I found the dates where this path had started. And sure enough, within a very short time, I mean, within 2 months, maybe three, I think maybe about the third month of dating, of seeing each other, I had written in my journal some of the red flags I noticed. And one of the things I wrote
Mm.
in there was, I don't know if we're going to be compatible or not. I really like this person, and she says she really likes me, but the things I'm noticing, we're on polar opposite ends of some aspects that could very well be important. It's maybe it will go a different direction, but this is just what I'm noticing at first. So I knew within just the first couple of months that things didn't look right in terms
Mm.
of compatibility. So as I read that, it kind of, you know, again, fast forward to when it's at the end of the relationship and it hadn't worked out. It kind of gave me some relief that I was correct. Not as in, oh, I'm right and she's wrong. Not that kind of correct, but correct about myself, that I was noticing the important
Mm.
things. And
You're
so
already seeing
it
these
took
all along
some
the
of that,
line.
right. It took some of that pressure off, like, okay, yeah, I was correct. And
Yeah.
this wasn't a matter of somebody did something drastically bad to the other person and blah, blah, blah. It wasn't a big fallout. It was just, this wasn't a good match to begin with. So it made a lot more
Yeah.
sense. And it helped me emotionally to be able to process, even though I still didn't want it to end. Um, it just made sense and it helped me a lot. And for those people that are constantly worrying, constantly seeing those negative things, start writing down your thoughts and feelings
Mm.
and then go back occasionally and read them. And you'll see those patterns and you'll recognize and be like, oh, yeah, I see this is what I'm doing. I do recognize that.
Mm.
And it gives you that strength to be able to, it gives you confidence in making your own
Yeah.
changes without having to say, okay,
Mhm.
I need, some sort of extreme help.
The dating dynamic has changed so much from the time I started dating because my wife and I just celebrated 7 years together. And we've talked about this all the time. If something would ever happen to the other person, we'll go, well, we're never going to date now because everyone does it online.
Uh-huh.
And I hear so many horror stories. And again, I keep bringing up friends, but I have a friend that has tried and tried and tried and tried to find guys online, and they all are jerks. Basically, they'll go out for a couple of dates, they want one thing only, and then they just like either ghost her or she just doesn't know what's going on. Is this typical of dating online, or do you know anything about that? Or what would you advise people to look for the red flags?
Dating online, that's a red flag. Oh, this is a good topic. So scientifically, we are we are all dependent upon the hormones and neurotransmitters in our bodies. So dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, epinephrine, all these things. And each of them have a natural role to play. The way we're made, the way we're
Mm,
designed, the way we function. Now, if you have something that interferes with one of those, like clinical depression, ADHD, um, both of those are known to interfere with like serotonin or dopamine. That's an obvious one right there. Okay, here's a problem. So, blah, blah, blah. But the point being that even romantic interest, not even just a connection, but just the interest gives you that little pump, gives your brain that little pump. So online dating where you're scrolling and swiping, it's like a drug. It's like a drug
mm,
and people become addicted to it and they don't even realize it because it's not like it's making them drunk or high, but it's that nervous system, those little pumps, little pumps, little pumps of dopamine. And so you're getting this little boom, boom, boom. It's like a micro shock. It's not strong enough for
yeah.
you to feel it or be painful, but it's enough for your system to feel it. So just the
Mm,
fact of swiping and scrolling is it's an addiction. We can become
gotcha.
addicted to it. So then even when you go out on a date and you talk to this person, if there's no connection for one, your body's already expecting that same little hit. Boom, 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 boom. You got your hit. Your addiction has been fed just through the process of getting there. So you're not as likely to get that during the actual meeting phase because again your
Gotcha.
subconscious, your nervous system is looking for something else, and if it doesn't happen, it's kind of like all right, this is a letdown. Now it might happen, and that's a good thing too, but it's less likely to happen through this type of process. Whereas you go to work, you're single, there's some other single person in the company that you work for, and you meet them at the vending machine. Hey, how are you? And there's a little bit of attraction there. Oh, she's cute. Oh, he's handsome. Okay. And then over the next month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever, you kind of start talking. It's a gradual buildup. That's what your body and subconscious and nervous system is meant for because it's
Mm,
going to build oxytocin. Oxytocin comes from an attachment, a connection. So it's not dependent on that dopamine hit. It's not trying to fulfill an addiction that's already there. So there's a huge difference in the way your nervous system and the way your mind reacts to those two different types of processes. Then you add in if there's any trauma to that. If
mm,
anybody's ever read or heard about attachment theory, go listen to it. Go find, read, listen, something to attachment theory. There's secure attachment, which is what we're supposed to be in. That's how we're made, our body operates, secure attachment. Then there's anxious or avoidant. And it's funny because both of these two that are insecure attachments are looking for the same thing. They're looking for that secure attachment. And this all goes back to the attachment from your primary caregiver, which is normally the mother. It can have some attachment to the father as well, but it's not quite the same as if your mother didn't provide the correct type of care, affection, things like that. So a person growing up without the correct amount of affection, the right amount of care, the right amount of support and teaching independence, if they're missing that somewhere in those very early years, like the first 3 years especially, um,
Hmm.
then it can cause them to have one of these insecure attachments. Anxious, they're afraid of being left, so they cling and they do things as a people pleaser. And in a relationship, that comes across as if there's the slightest bit of inconsistency, their system freaks out. The person doesn't
Yep.
text back in 30 seconds. Their mind starts to, oh crap, something's wrong. And
Yep.
so it causes them to go closer because they want to grasp on to provide that. The avoidant
Yeah.
is the opposite. Too much closeness triggers their system as a warning sign. Crap, I'm being smothered. I'm losing my independence, which is
Hmm.
eventually going to cost me this relationship. I'm still going to lose the care and affection that I deeply want to be involved in. But now I feel like I'm losing myself and I've got to distance. I got to cause some distance here. So the two are opposite of each other.
Yeah.
So you throw that into the mix of dating. And that's something that you don't know about another person and without some deep conversation, which is probably not going to happen till later, which kind of goes back to the
Hmm.
first point. If it's a gradual progression, there we go. My brain. If it's a gradual progression, it's better and easier to have those conversations because you're not rushing into something. If it's online dating and swiping, been there, done that. Again, you're looking for that instant
Hmm.
connection, and that's what you expect because that's what we've told our system to look for. And you're not going to find those things out instantly.
No. And I think you have to take it slow.
Yes, slower the better. Like I said, it's the connection, and all this goes back to, you know, childhood psychological theory. The
Yeah.
romantic connection is meant to replace, be the next step in evolution from our parental connection.
Hmm.
So it's your parental connection grows over time. Even in your mother's womb, you were there for 9 months, growing and being connected to your mother. The sound of her voice, the feeling of her hormones and chemicals, um, the food she ate, all those things. It's a slow progress. And then when you're born, now you're in this growth period where your mind and your body's growing. And so you're dependent upon that relationship. So this is the next phase of that. This is what it's supposed to be. And
Yeah.
when you jump in quick, the more breakage you're going to have. And the more breakage you have, the more difficult it's going to be to make, find, or create an authentic connection.
Yeah.
And that's just psychological truth. It's not one we like to hear. I I don't like to hear it. I've been there, done that. I just described a case and it didn't work out. We come up with these excuses and say, well, it didn't work out because of this, didn't work out because of this, didn't work out because okay, but none of them are working out. Relationships are
Right.
hard enough to begin with. So when
Hmm.
we're throwing all this into the mix before we even get started, it's going to be almost impossible. And it's going to take a lot more work to even
Yeah.
get it to a stable point.
When you are growing up, you either have the parents that are smothering. They tell you, like in my case, my mother was very smothering, and she would always say, "Oh, you're not going to amount to anything," and she'd make fun of me, stuff like that. But then you have the parents that are like the super parents that want to take you everywhere, do everything for you, and then you're getting to the point to where you're being dependent upon someone else.
Yep. Yep. And both of those are bad. Both are on opposite ends of the spectrum, and
Right.
where you've got neglectful and abusive all the way to, what I don't know if it's still called this, but years ago there was a term, it's helicopter parenting. And so I
Yeah.
don't know if that's popular right now, but the idea being that someone is just involved in deciding every single aspect of their child's life, being with them every single minute of every single day. And that's not good either. That's not teaching independence. Like you said, it's teaching codependence. And which again,
Mm,
that's that's what their mind is going to look for in the future. That's what their mind is going to expect as normal in future relationships. And that's not going to
mm,
work out well either. So
right.
I would, encourage parents to, for one, just be honest with yourself. Look at yourself first and say, okay, do I have any past trauma that is unhealed or that I need to manage better? Because dealing with my past trauma is going to help
Mm,
me to be a better parent. And two, read and listen to what is good for your child in terms of development, that's not a
mm,
trend, you know. And the helicopter parenting thing actually came from a trend that was written, it was from a book that was written, I think, back in the 60s or 70s or whatever. And it was part of the whole kind of baby Einstein movement, basically saying if you force fed your kids classical music and calculus at 3 years of age, that they were going to grow up to be geniuses. And that's just not true. It's just not the way it works. Their brain's not equipped to handle that. You know, it's
right.
just looking back on it, it sounds silly, right? But,
Yeah.
in the moment in history, when we're real life going through this stuff, sometimes you don't know. You're just like, oh, well, here's this doctor that's coming out and saying this, and it sounds good, so we should do it. But
Yeah.
yeah, no. Teach them resilience. Teach them how to learn on their own. Uh, teach them how to think and question on their own. The most intelligent people,
Yeah.
the ones that always invent stuff, discover stuff, it's because they question. They're like, this doesn't sound right, or this sounds limited. What else can we do?
Hmm.
Or someone says, oh, we could never do this. Really? We can't? Why not? What if we did this? What if we did that? You know, and this is also stuff that will be beneficial in relationships, because if a person starts a relationship and they see some red flags, if they're if they're not questioning, then they're just going to blow right through them and say, oh, well, it's not a big deal or whatever. But if they're questioning, they
Hmm.
can say, hmm, I see this. eh, I don't know all of the details yet, but it seems off. And that
Hmm.
can be a good factor.
Kind of circling back where you were talking about the development of the children. One of the more common things nowadays are the child's going between two homes, and you have one parent that's the helicopter parent, and one parent is like, whatever.
That's a tough one. And it's definitely takes some work for the parents. As much communication as you can have with the other one is the better. You have to be able to put your personal hurts from the past aside. I've read countless studies on child development that say you should make every effort not to talk bad about the other parent to the child, because children learn subconsciously that their ego, their worth, their value is based on their parents, both of them.
Mm,
So if one parent is talking trash about the other parent, you're not hurting that other parent. You're hurting that child because the child is absorbing that as their self worth and their self value. Now,
yeah,
that
makes
parent might
sense.
be garbage. They might be garbage, and there might be things that you need to do as the other parent to manage the relationships better, to help your child better. But talking junk around to in front of your children, you're not hurting that other adult. You're hurting that child. And
Yeah.
you've got to find ways to make sure the child stays in contact with that parent. And here's a very good example of why this is important. Um, one of the areas I specialized in study was childhood trauma. And there was a study done back in the late 1980s. It's called the ACE study, and that stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. So if you've never read about the ACE study, shameless plug, you can go to episode 1 of my podcast where I describe it, or you could look it up and read it about it for yourself. Either way is good as long as you get the information. But I do discuss it. Adverse childhood experiences. And what this study did was looked at, I think, over like 17,000 people. And it asked them just yes or no questions, a list of 10 things. Did you experience this during childhood? And each one was an adverse experience. So something that would negatively affect the child's development.
Mm,
Um, Loss of a parent through death or divorce or separation. That's counted. A parent that's in prison. That's counted.
mm,
So even these things that we think, okay, this wasn't directly done to the child. So, like if I said child abuse, like someone beat their child and locked them in a closet and fed them feces, oh, yeah, of course, that makes sense. This child was beaten and abused and tortured. Of course, that's,
yeah.
but a parent going to prison, they didn't do anything to the child. They committed a crime somewhere else and got punished for it.
Yeah.
That has the same possible effect as abuse and neglect
Wow.
on the child's development. So the loss of a parent hurts the child's self image so much so that it can create mental illness problems and it creates physical illness problems. This whole study, the ACE study, what it really set out to prove was that these things happening during childhood actually cause physical illness later in adulthood. And it proved it by a long shot.
Mm,
Um, but back to the point of this in terms of parenting, one parent being out of the picture has a huge negative effect on the child's self image, self worth, career in the future, physical health, mental health, and relationships. So, you, no matter why, there's this two home experience going on, whether you were never married, whether you got divorced, separated, whatever, you as the parent, you for that child, you've got to make that effort consciously all the time to try to find ways to keep them communicating, whether it's a phone
mm,
call, if it's visits, if it's whatever, you know, letters, go
mm.
old school, let them write. I throw my throwback to journaling, the importance of writing on the brain.
Yeah.
It works for kids. Imagine that. Whatever you have to do, find, be creative. You're smart. You can figure it out. But this is how important it is. It's got to be done for that child's welfare.
Thank you so much for the great information today. I think we could talk for 6 hours and not even scratch the surface.
Oh, yeah.
So the door's always open for you to come on and share your knowledge. Before we go, I want you to at least have the opportunity to share anything before we say goodbye.
Yeah. One of my favorite things to leave people with is the same thing I have told myself for years and years that I learned a long time ago. Same thing I tell clients in my coaching practice is become a student of yourself. Um,
Mm.
take the time as if you were, you know, taking PhD classes to become a surgeon. You know, learn yourself, learn your past, how it's affecting you, learn where you're at now, where you want to go, learn what you need to do that, learn what's healthy for you mentally, physically, socially. Become a student of yourself.
Guys, it's been a great pleasure to have Jamie on the program today. And I want you to make sure you look in the notes below to have links to his website and to his, I don't know if I even asked you of your website, but his podcast is definitely linked below.
I was
Uh,
broken, now I'm
but yes,
whole. Wrote new
it's been great.
chapters for
And we'll
my
see you
soul.
guys next
Not
week.
the end, just re-inspired. This is me, my life rewired.